I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey. A journey through literature, because one has been reading. In fairness, I often read. It's not unusual that I've got a book with me. I've got plenty of books to hand. I don't just grab them randomly off the shelf and start reading. I typically pick a book and read it. The book could be print, it could be digital, it doesn't matter, I enjoy reading. I have lots of trade paperbacks as well that I can read, and I have a cycle of those that I run through, but that's not what we're talking about today. Oh no, we're talking about literature, aren't we? We're talking about two books I've recently read. We have Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, and we have Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. And in between these two, which I've read recently, I've finished Treasure Island recently, we have The Catch by T.M. Logan, which isn't considered a literary classic, but we'll come on to that book later. Now, when I was reading Treasure Island, not actually when I was reading it because I was focused on the book, but at the time that I was reading Treasure Island, something happened on the internet. I think it was Threads, it might have been Twitter, where a user had posted, "Dear authors, please use easy words in your books/fics. Thank you, yours truly, reader." Now, there was a lot of backlash to this, and there was a lot of people defending her. Well, there were people defending, there were people against, and it became a whole thing. I'm not going to turn it into a whole thing, I'm just going to bring it up to put some context into this. And the example that the user gives is a Google search for scrying means. Now, if you're looking up the word scrying, chances are you're looking up something maybe fantasy or, like supernatural, paranormal, that sort of ballpark. And the description it gives in the AI overview on Google is: scrying is an ancient practice of divination where a person gazes into a reflective or translucent surface such as a crystal ball. Now, I have an issue with that. If you're using that as an example of having to identify easy words, divination and translucent are probably not easy words. Chances are you might look at divination and think divine. I've heard of divine, it means lovely. It's not the root of the word. Translucent, you'll know. Chances are you'd know reflective if you knew reflection, and reflect as in a mirror, as opposed to a way of thinking. Translucent, less so. But some people came after the person who'd written that with one particular defence that baffled me, which was an accusation of ableism. There is absolutely nothing wrong with readers asking for easier words. If that upsets you so much, check your ableism. And the issue that I have with this is authors shouldn't write to be easy. They should write to be interesting, and there is an intersection. You don't have to use complicated words for every other word in a sentence, but by the same vein, we learn by consuming things we don't understand, and that happened in Treasure Island. I'll explain to you why I have a second copy of Treasure Island in a moment. Now, in this, there was a couple of... Treasure Island is written for its time, very much like Oliver Twist is, and even though the stories have become... praised. They are literary classics. Children read this type of thing, typically in abridged form. Or adapted form, that's probably a better phrasing. There was a couple of times when there were words I didn't understand. There's a reference to cannikin. And that one was one of the first that struck me in the book, where a character was, I think, filling up a cannikin. And I'd never seen the word before, and I thought, perhaps it's like, perhaps we've shortened cannikin down to can. In the same way that a pram is a shortened form of perambulator. Or I think a bus is an omnibus, not as in the book style, but I think that might be right. I could be completely wrong there. Could look it up, not going to. So I was thinking about this, and I was able to glean the meaning from the context. And I don't know the context of the use of the word scrying, but in this case, in Treasure Island, a character was filling up something, and I think they drink from it. So it sounded like it was going to be a cup, or a can, or a tin, or something relatively small. It wasn't going to be a bucket, or like a cauldron. And it turns out cannekin is, it comes from an old Dutch word that means little can. So I was right, there you go. Being able to glean from context is great. What I love about dictionaries and encyclopedias, it makes me sound so much like a nerd, which we've established I'm not. What I like about dictionaries and encyclopedias is occasionally, and I do it with Wikipedia from time to time, but they make it far too easy. I'd look something up and think, ooh, that bit of the explanation sounds interesting. I don't understand it. I'll look that up as well. I didn't expect the information to be spoon-fed to me. I'm no longer in school, and even in schools they try to get you to look to have a vested interest in learning things yourself as opposed to having information spoon-fed to you. But there you go. The idea that it's ableism as well. Not knowing the meaning of a word isn't any form of ism, really. You know, like, somebody isn't foolish for not knowing the meaning of a word, it's just that they've never seen it. Just as an example, when I was reading Harry Potter for the first time, I didn't recognise the word Hermione. I was pronouncing it as Hermione. It took me absolutely ages to learn it was Hermione. It was when I was watching the first film and she's introduced, it's like, oh my word. Well, the weird thing was, I'd heard of an actress with the first name Hermione. I just didn't put two and two together. Same with the name Persephone. Chances are, if you were to see that written on a piece of paper and you had no frame of reference, you might think it's Persephone. There's a moment in The Simpsons where Marge Simpson says, run like the wind, and Lisa responds, it's like the wind, and she replies, well, I've never heard it said before. It's true, if you've never heard something said before, and you know, you would probably guess at the pronunciation of the word. You would in the case of Persephone and Hermione, break it down phonetically, which is how we were told to pronounce words at primary school. Doesn't apply to scrying, of course. Doesn't apply to easy words. It's just me rambling. Why have I got two copies of Treasure Island, first of all? I bought this one first, and I like this one. This is a 2019, I think it's a Penguin Hodder and Stoughton release, or whoever owns them now. Let's have a look. Penguin Random House release. You know, it's cloth bound. It is quite nice. It has a little fabric bookmark. I quite like them. There's a whole set of literary classics, and it's the type of thing where if you were to put them on the shelf and it was a set of them, they would look pleasing to the eye, and they are readable as well, which is good, because there'd be nothing worse than it just being a book for display purposes. I bought it in an Oxfam shop in a local town, and it was about £3, I think it was. I think they retail for about 12 or 13. This one is in a much older version, and this is the style that I actually wanted when I decided I wanted to buy Treasure Island, but specifically second hand, and I wanted to get it off a shelf. Could have eBayed it, didn't want to. I like looking at books before I buy them. This I bought quite recently, and this is the version I finished reading. And again, it is perfectly readable, you know, even though it's a small book, the text isn't you know, like magnifying glass small. And I bought it as part of a 3 for £1 offer. There was a copy of R.L. Stevenson's Kidnapped with it. And I could have just bought Kidnapped and 2 other books. The other book I bought was about cults and secret societies, I think. And I saw this and I knew I wanted the. Well, I saw Kidnapped, I knew I wanted Kidnapped, saw that there was this as well, and I thought, I don't want to break up the pair. So I bought this, and I'm happy I did. There was a minor issue with it in that I've had to secure it with Copydex. The mull, which is the like the canvas where the webbing fabric that goes down the spine, had come away from the page block, which is just the block of pages. So I needed to glue it back together. It's something I've done before using Copydex, because it is acid free and it is great for that type of thing. Takes an absolute age to dry properly, but there you go. That's why I've got 2 copies. I would like more of these editions, not of Treasure Island. I've got 2, but I'm not in a rush to. I have a full set of these. And I mean, going back to this just quickly, I don't know when it was published. I'm going to assume it was the 60s. It's a Collins Clear type edition. I have a full set of these Charles Dickens work in this format. These are the type of things that you occasionally see in vintage shops going for, like a £5 a book. They're not worth that. They were mass produced. They just look pretty. Again, this is, I don't know what year this was produced actually. It probably won't tell me because it'll have been that era. 20th century at some point. Obviously, obviously, at some point in the 20th century. It's not going to be like yeah, and I really enjoyed that. And very much like Treasure Island, written for its time, so some of the phrasing, some of the descriptions were not common to me. There were a number of descriptions where I'm thinking, what is he trying to say here? And that gets me on to my next point, because we do have a point. There was a study last year, I think it was, that said that it was a study of 85 students in, I believe, America. And they got them to read the opening paragraph of Charles Dickens' Bleak House. And this is the thing with this: it's America. They were reading the opening paragraph of Bleak House. These were, I think it was all English majors, some English majors and some English education majors. Okay. They participated in a 20-minute reading session in which they were asked to read the first 7 paragraphs of Charles Dickens' Bleak House out loud to a facilitator and then translate each sentence into plain English. Before subjects started the reading test, they were given access to online resources and dictionaries and advised they could use their own cell phones as a resource. So they were given access to dictionaries, Wikipedia probably, and being able to do it all on the phone. Which goes back to what I was saying earlier, the ability to read something, not understand elements of it and do a bit more research. The problem is, if you can't understand any of it at all, you can't pick up anything from what you're reading. The results: 58%, 49 out of 85 students in the judgment of the investigators understood so little of the introduction to Bleak House that they would not be able to read the novel on their own. 38%, 32 of 85, did somewhat better, but this cohort could only interpret half of the literal prose in the passage. Okay, understanding half of what you're reading is better than understanding none of it, as long as you can extrapolate meaning from the bits that you don't understand. Now, I know you're thinking this, no, you might not be thinking this, but how can English majors and English education majors not understand Bleak House? It's a classic, it's Charles Dickens. So this article includes the first paragraph. Now, bearing in mind they were given 20 minutes, was it, to read the opening first 7 paragraphs. 20 minutes to read 7 paragraphs doesn't sound bad. You haven't read Dickens. Here we go, first paragraph. London. Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Implacable November weather. As much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth, and it would not be wonderful to meet a megalosaurus, 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. Smoke lowering down from chimney pots, making a soft black drizzle, with flakes of soot in it as big as full-grown snowflakes, gone into mourning, one might imagine, for the death of the sun. Dogs, undistinguishable in mire, horses scarcely better, splashed to their very blinkers, foot passengers, jostling one another's umbrellas in a general inflection of ill temper and losing their foothold at street corners where tens of thousands of other foot passengers have been slipping and sliding since the day broke, if this day ever broke, adding new deposits to the crust upon crust of mud sticking to those points tenaciously to the pavement and accumulating at compound interest. A lot to take in there. We know we're in Lincoln's Inn Hall, which may be a pub. It could be a stately home. We're not sure. I'm tempted to say it's a pub of some description because of the description of the location that comes afterwards. There are people wandering around, walking outside, so it doesn't sound like a stately manor. Michaelmas term lately over suggests it was maybe October. because I'm sure Michaelmas is late September. London, capital city of England. As much mud on the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth suggests that there had been some type of torrential downpour and it had stopped and people going about their business. I'm going to suggest it's morning. I believe that it doesn't specifically say morning, but that feels like when it would be. There's lots of mud around. People are walking through it. People appear to be inconvenienced by other people also walking on the mud. With it saying deposits of crust upon crust of mud, it suggests that the mud is drying and caking. But then he does say that the flakes of soot gone into mourning, one might imagine, for the death of the sun. So it doesn't suggest it's going to be a hot day or a warm day at the very least. Okay. The smoke towering from the chimneys, lowering down from the chimneys, suggests that coal fires have been lit, which again plays into the idea of the implacable November weather. It's cold. Now, I'm not saying that's a sentence-per-sentence analysis by any means. It's just the context I picked up from that opening paragraph. So it sets in my mind a grim presentation of London, smoggy, drab, annoyed people trying to go about the business. If they're carrying umbrellas, the rain has chances are recently stopped or is expected to start again. Animals in the street, including the horses, are all muddy, which suggests that they've been running through the mud and playing. They've been let out to do that or been outside while this storm was happening. All while the Lord Chancellor sits indoors, probably with his lovely, lovely fire going. Far from a sentence-per-sentence analysis, but that's the image that I've built up in my mind. I do want to read Bleak House. The challenge with this type of writing, and it's true of Oliver Twist, is that a lot of the sentences... there's a lot of long paragraphs, there's a lot of complex sentences and sentence fragments, and a very stop-start feel. But it is still relatively accessible. The thing that I noticed, because like I said, I read Oliver Twist and Treasure Island, but in between that I read The Catch by T.M. Logan. The thing that I noticed about this, now T.M. Logan, this is the second T.M. Logan book I've read. I enjoyed both of them. He's described as the master of the all night thriller, and I couldn't thoroughly understand that. Now, it wasn't a case of me picking up a book one night and reading it all through the same evening, but what I was doing was devouring chapters. Typically, if I read a book, I like to pace myself because I don't want the book to be over quickly. It was a challenge with Treasure Island and Oliver Twist just because of the way that we were written. So typically I would read one, maybe two chapters and then come back to it later. Not because I was bored, just because it was a much more involved way of thinking to read these than it is to read the far snappier paced prose of a T.M. Logan. I'm reading James Patterson and Brian Sitts' The Shadow now, and I'm finding the same thing as the T.M. Logan book. It's snappier paced. The wording is much more... It's not lesser by any means, it's not easier by any means, it just feels more pacey. So I read it as if I was watching, an action scene in a film where I know it's building up to something and I want to see what comes next. That's how I was reading these. I was reading it with that, what felt like at pace, compared to these where I feel I was reading at a more leisurely pace, taking in everything. There are elements of The Catch I didn't quite understand. The character in it is an advertising executive, and I think T.M. Logan was. So there were occasional terms or phrasing or situations that he used that I didn't quite get because I've never been in that situation, but T.M. Logan explains it. And he doesn't explain it in that condescending way where it's like, I was doing a campaign, which is what we call a project. Yeah, it wasn't written like that. There are authors that do that. I haven't done this video just to show off 2 copies of Treasure Island, by the way, but what I'm saying is that easy words, words are something I was taught in tech support was it's only easy if you know how. Oh, is it easy? Doesn't mean anything to anyone, because what's easy for me may not be easy for you. Is it easy to understand? I thoroughly enjoyed The Catch by T.M. Logan. I've got a couple of other T.M. Logans on the shelf as well. I am absolutely looking forward to reading them. I have all of Dickens' work in these. I know I do want to put them on a shelf because these will look fantastic when I do that. And there are a number of them I do want to read, but I'm more likely to read a modern book than I am a classic. These are the type of things I want to dip into when the urge takes me. This is the type of thing I want to pick up off the shelf and read out of what I would call a huge collection of possibilities. I thoroughly enjoyed reading Treasure Island and Oliver Twist. Both stories I thought I knew, but it turns out I may only know them either from film adaptations or the musical Oliver. Maybe The Muppets Treasure Island. And, the adaptations I would have read as a kid. I am watching Black Sails, which serves as a prequel to Treasure Island, and thoroughly enjoying that, which is the reason why I wanted to read Treasure Island anyway, because it's one of those stories where I think to myself, well, Captain Flint was a parrot, Long John Silver, Billy Bones, it's all just a bunch of names I know, but watching Black Sails and seeing these characters, I'm thinking, I couldn't tell you. Okay, Long John Silver has, the parrot and a wooden leg. That's all I can tell you. Until I read Treasure Island and thoroughly enjoyed it. Same with Oliver Twist. A lot of what I know of Oliver Twist probably comes from Oliver ! And reading the story, you realise how dark it is in places, dark and deeply depressing it is in places. It's a world, it's a London where, for be it Nancy or at various points Oliver, there's no hope. Yeah, and there definitely isn't any hope for Nancy. And understanding all of that and seeing it wrought in Dickens' prose was just such an experience. But it was a more complex read than T.M. Logan's work, which, as I said, thoroughly enjoyed. Also thoroughly enjoyed the James Patterson book I'm reading at the moment. Read one by him before. It was The President is Missing. He co-wrote it with Bill Clinton. Really enjoyed that. But yeah, that's it. That's it really. I just thought I'd show off a couple of copies of Treasure Island, talk about easy words and literature in general. Oh well, reading in general. Read. If you don't want to go and buy books, go to your local library. You can sit in there and flip through books to your heart's content and find something you might enjoy. And in fairness, I said this to somebody recently, because somebody I know recently has been putting up Instagram stories of the books that they're reading, and they're reading at such a pace. It's really, really lovely to see. And I think they put up a post about the type of books they were reading. I dropped them a message saying it doesn't matter what you're reading as long as you enjoy it. I could sit here video after video with a different copy of a Dickens book, being all, oh well, if one isn't reading Dickens, what is one doing with one's life? But that's not reading for everyone. I would hazard a guess that there are very few people who think to themselves, oh, I've had a hard day at work, what shall I pick up? Bleak House sounds like a really fun read. They might do, you never know. But something like a T.M. Logan, a James Patterson, any of these prolific writers, it is the type of thing where you can pick it up and chances are it's going to draw you in, and if it doesn't, there's going to be something else you could read, definitely in your library if not at home. And also, if you're looking for cheap books, charity shops. All of these came through a job lot on eBay. Having said that, I prefer to find books on shelves. I saw these as a job lot on eBay and they were going for a lot less, and I'd seen them in a number of vintage shops. So I thought I'd pick up the full set. The vast majority of other books I buy come from charity shops. Trade paperbacks quite often eBay. I have bought some of those new though, but that's a personal choice. So yeah, there's loads of ways to get cheap books if you want to read, and you don't if you want to get back into reading, don't think that, oh, I must look like I'm doing this properly, I'll pick up this really thick 700-page book. Yeah, I mean, that said, I mean, what length is this? This is like a few hundred pages, 400 and something pages, which sounds insurmountable if you pick it up and if you look at it, but in reality, read the first chapter, and if you're drawn in, if it captures you completely, you know it's worth reading. But yeah, don't feel that you just have to pick up the thickest book imaginable, or even something that is a literary darling or a critic's darling. If you want to read comics, read comics. If you want to read romance, science fiction, fantasy, whatever it is, just read it. Also, you can get the Amazon app, the Kindle app, if you really want to, for your phone, and just read on there. If you've got an Amazon Prime subscription, you get a free book every month from a short list of unpublished books called, I think, Amazon First Reads. Yeah, it's rarely anything that's major, but at least it might start you reading. Try different genres as well. There was a time when I didn't think I would read the type of thing that T.M. Logan would write, and it turns out I'm wrong, because I tried it and I thought, yeah, I really get this. I read that, what's it called, a Thursday Murder Club recently. I love murder mysteries. Didn't think I'd enjoy a murder mystery about a group of people in an old folks home. Really enjoyed it. Very much like T.M. Logan, tearing through chapter and chapter after that. Enjoy reading. I'll catch you all again next time. Oh, quickly, like, share, subscribe, all that type of thing. Don't know what we'll talk about next time. We'll take a look. Well, next time. Bye for now.